Hello, everyone. Welcome to And Yet We Believe. I'm Roger Pimentel. This is Ann Pimentel.
Hi.
And we are a married couple having honest conversations about the beautiful, messy middle of Latter-day Saint life. Thanks to everybody who's joining. We are broadcasting, as always, live on Instagram. Do you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, so the title of our episode today is It Doesn't Have to Happen to You for It to Matter to You. This stems from some comments that we have received or heard in person or online in the last couple of weeks. And what it boils down to is usually somebody is sharing something that they have experienced or that they're going through. And somebody, usually a white man, says, well, this has never happened to me. It's never been my experience, so it doesn't really matter, so you should just get over it. It's not a big deal.
Right.
That hurts.
That's invalidating someone's experience.
It's a really hard comment to hear, and it is very easy to want to push back quite harshly, because
Right.
It gets to very personal feelings really fast.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of restraint to not say anything and to not get into an argument over that. But we want to talk about kind of what that phrase means, maybe where it's coming from, why people are saying it.
What phrase?
It doesn't have to happen to you to matter to you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or why people are saying it hasn't happened to me and so it shouldn't matter to you.
Right.
Okay. So we want to share a little bit about that and then maybe some ideas of what we can do when we hear that or if we are the ones saying that.
Right. How we can not be that person who's
Right.
invalidating other
Right.
people's experiences.
Yeah. So why don't you kick it off? What do you think about it?
Yeah, well, the first thing I went to was, what are some examples here? And maybe we can share some kind of practical, real-life examples of where we've seen this come up with people kind of openly invalidating other people's experiences. So both of us post on Instagram, on our Instagram accounts, and just like for the record, you get all kinds in the comments.
Yep.
You get all kinds of people. And, there's trolls that you just have to block and move on and that sort of thing. But then there are people who are sincere, but are doing this kind of invalidating thing. So a while back, I talked about when President Hinckley talked about having multiple sets of earrings. Mm-hmm. And I talked about my experience being in Young Men at the time and having lessons where we were taught as young men, oh, you shouldn't date young women who have more than one set of earrings because they're not following the prophet.
Yeah. So that's a lived experience that you have had.
Yes. I sat in those lessons. That's an experience I had. And there was somebody in the comments saying, you weren't taught that.
Like, do I know you? Are you there?
Yeah. Have you been tracking me this whole time? And it was super weird. And this sort of thing happens sometimes. And they're like, no, that. And I think probably what they were trying to say maybe was, oh, well, that wasn't an official church stance. That may be true.
Yeah.
That does not speak against my experience, which, yeah, I sat in a lesson, I heard these things, and was like, oh, okay, 15-year-old me is like, oh, interesting, I guess. I don't know. 17-year-old me, I guess, at the time. And so that's an example of somebody, it's almost a little bit gaslighty saying, no, you didn't have that experience. Yeah. Do you have one?
Yeah, well, this came up in a very real way in multiple areas in my life this week with polygamy lesson, where people were saying, like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to practice polygamy. This isn't a thing for you, so don't worry about it. When very realistically, eternal polygamy is alive and well in the temple, where one man can be sealed to multiple women and women cannot be sealed to multiple men.
Right.
And so this is a very real thing. If I were to die and my husband were to remarry, suddenly I'm a polygamous wife.
Right.
And I would have no choice in it.
Right.
And so that it's a very real possibility. I hope it isn't, and I hope it never happens.
Same.
But to invalidate my feelings, and even if the temple wasn't part of it, the fact that 36 women in my ancestry were part of polygamous marriages that is really hard to deal with. And I believe in generational trauma that is passed down. And so, yeah, I'm not living it, but I am feeling the trauma that those women did, and I have to do things to get past that. They had to face, do I follow the prophet or do I follow what I feel is right? And that's a hard choice to feel, and that is still something that I have to deal with and figure out in my own life.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I think there are lots of examples. I think there's lots of smaller examples that show up kind of frequently in the church. And I just have a couple of them. Maybe somebody is dealing with depression and somebody says, oh, well, you just have to choose to be happy. Yeah. Or one thing that we've seen is somebody brings up something that's challenging and somebody just testifies back to them.
Yeah.
Say, hey, maybe this general conference talk was a challenge for me. Well, I believe the prophet was called of God. Okay. You got it,
And it doesn't address the actual issue.
Right.
That's a big part of it, is they're like taking a different route, and it's like, okay, but that has nothing to do with what I'm actually dealing with. Right.
Yeah. And any time where it's like, oh, you just need to read your scriptures more, oh, you just need to pray more, is dismissive of somebody's experience. I think probably they don't have any idea how much you read the scriptures or pray.
Right.
And so it's a way to just gloss right over it and not validate someone's lived experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a way of opting out of our covenant to mourn with those that mourn. And what I think, when we get to the root of why people are saying this, it's because they don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't want to be vulnerable. Mourning with those that mourn and comforting people that stand in need of comfort, that requires us to be in a vulnerable position,
right,
where people are maybe crying on our shoulder, and some people don't do well with emotion, and they don't do well with things that are uncomfortable. And so we do have to put ourselves into an uncomfortable situations sometimes,
right,
to really understand what people are going through.
Yeah, and sometimes validating somebody's experience, especially with the church, means validating a negative experience. And I think that's hard for some people to do.
Yeah.
And so, there was one time I taught a Sunday school lesson, and I was pretty vulnerable about, hey, we have not always felt like we belong in this ward. And I think that made some people uncomfortable. And somebody came up to me after the lesson and said, well, I've always felt welcome in this ward. And then there was a pause.
Great.
And I was like,
you want a pat on the head?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
You didn't fix it for me. But I think this individual was uncomfortable with engaging with that idea that somebody would not feel comfortable at church, of all places.
Right. So I have two quotes that kind of speak to this. The first one is Brene Brown.
Great.
She says, empathy is not connecting to an experience, it's connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that good? So that, mourning with those that mourn, you don't have to have lost a parent to be able to mourn with a person who just lost their parent. You don't have to have, you're not connecting with the experience, but you have been sad in your life. And so you can mourn and connect with the sadness that they are feeling.
Oh, I love that. So kind of going back to the point we were just making about, if it's church specific and it's uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you have to have a shared experience with the person. Yeah. If this person is saying, I was harmed by the church, you don't have to say, yes, the church is harmful. You just have to say, I see that you're mourning.
Yeah. Being harmed is painful.
Right.
Or, there's lots of
things. That's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah. So the other quote is from Henry Nouwen.
Yeah.
He says, compassion, so the other side of empathy, empathy is the feeling, and I think compassion is the action that it leads us to do.
Okay, great.
Compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter into the places of pain, to share in brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish. Compassion requires us to be weak with the weak, vulnerable with the vulnerable, and powerless with the powerless. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human.
Ooh.
So that's the vulnerable part, and to enter into the hurt, and to enter in, not that you're feeling it. Again, it's not that you are experiencing the same hurt, but you enter into that person's hurt.
Right.
And you can comfort them based on other times you've been hurt. We've all felt experiences that are painful or hard, and we don't have to say, yeah, one time I had somebody throw a rock at me and it hurt, like we don't have to tell them our experience, but we can just pull from our memory what it feels like to suffer or hurt, and then we enter in and we can have compassion for these people.
Yeah, I love the beginning of that. Compassion asks us to go where it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And I have actually a really similar quote from Richard Rohr. So we got Henry now and we got Richard Rohr. We're kind of getting this from all sides. He says, we have to place ourselves in situations with people who are not like us, outside our systems of success and security, so we can read life from another perspective. The needs we witness will pull us toward love, toward generosity, and compassion.
Yeah. And so that's why it's hard. I think when people hear hard situations, they hear pain, they hear, crying, whatever, they want to just say, nope, I don't want to go anywhere near that. That is too awkward, too uncomfortable. I don't want to be with people that are struggling in a different way than I struggle. And so they close it off, and then they say, like, well, it doesn't matter to me, so it shouldn't matter to you.
Or they want to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's where the, like, oh, you just need to pray more things coming from. And it's coming from the exact same place, which is, I am uncomfortable with you having these emotions.
Yeah, and fear, probably.
Yeah.
A lot of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. In the contemplative tradition, there's a idea called non-judgmental awareness. And usually this is something that you're doing towards yourself, which is being aware of your own feelings and not judging them. Just looking at things as they are and accepting them as they are. But I kind of like turning this also to apply to other people, which is I am aware of your suffering, and I feel that you are having pain, and I don't need to judge it. I just need to observe what is.
Yeah. So let's turn to the scriptures for some examples.
Okay.
I first want to start with Jesus because he gives us the best example of how to mourn with people and how to be with people.
Well, I can't have any examples after
No, you
Jesus.
can. It's okay. We'll go there. It's all right. So, I think one of the best examples is when Lazarus has died. Okay. And Mary and Martha come to meet him, and they're like, well, I think it's actually Martha comes out to meet him. Okay. And she's like, if you had come 3 days ago or whatever, he wouldn't have died. You missed it. He's dead. And Jesus didn't say, well, Lazarus, he didn't matter that much. It's fine. He didn't dismiss her pain. Okay. But as the scripture says, it says Jesus wept. He cried with her. He had lost people. He had been around people who had lost people before, At that point, Joseph probably had died, like Joseph isn't in the story anymore. And so he didn't like qualify the pain. He didn't say like, okay, well, you're feeling like a 9, but that person over there is feeling a 12. So I got to go help them first. Like he didn't have to judge out whose pain is more important right now. Right. He just cried with them.
Well, and he's about to go raise Lazarus from the dead.
Yeah.
And that's not where he goes either. He doesn't say, hey,
it's fine.
Don't worry about it. I'm going to fix it. It's going to be okay. Because what he's connecting with is her pain. Right. Like you said earlier.
Right.
He's connecting with her pain and having compassion for the pain she's feeling. That's an amazing example.
Yeah.
Really like that.
Yeah. Okay, Jesus wins.
Okay.
Who do you have?
And now for the second best example. So I went Job. Okay. And I went Job because it's a terrible example. Because his friends are awful. And what his friends do is they do the invalidating thing. And they do it a bunch of times. And I don't even have all of them down here. So he's got his 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And at different times they're talking to him and trying to make sense of all these things that have happened to him, his family dying, all of these things. He loses his property. And so Eliphaz, this is in chapter 4, it says, who that was innocent ever perished? which is, I've got to translate from biblical English, right? Is saying like, this must be happening because you sinned. This doesn't happen to innocent people.
Yeah.
Is what he's saying.
What have you done?
It's like, yeah, I think you brought this on yourself. Not helpful, right? And then Eliphaz again in the next chapter, chapter 5, says, how happy is the one whom God reproves. He's saying, oh, actually, you should be grateful this is happening. What a blessing.
Yeah.
Or, we've heard that before.
Yeah, we grow from our trials. When you're in the middle of a trial, that's the last thing you want to hear.
Right.
You'll grow. It's okay.
Yeah.
You'll learn something.
Yeah, Bildad in chapter 8 says, if you will seek God, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you. He's saying you just need to pray more. And then the third friend, Zophar, in chapter 11, says, should one full of talk be vindicated? He's saying you're complaining too much. You just need to move on. And so, like, we get example after example of Job's friends, quote unquote friends, really not making things better. When they could have sat with him, they could have mourned with him who mourned, and Job ends up being right and they all end up being wrong in the end. So not as good as the Jesus example, but it's so interesting to see examples of this invalidating happening in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, we need to see both sides.
Yeah.
We want to see the invalidating and, people being really harsh, and then we turn to Jesus for the good example of how to help people.
There we go.
Yeah. One of my friends always does, she talks about this great example, this great analogy, where somebody walks into a room full of people, and, they're sitting there chatting or whatever, and one person says, man, it's cold in here. And another person says, it's not cold. I'm not cold. I feel fine. And, like, even people in the same room can be having vastly different experiences. I think this is 100% true of our Sunday school classes.
Absolutely.
We go into Sunday school and we are approaching the lesson from different backgrounds, different experiences, different teachings growing up.
Yep.
And the poor teacher is there trying to gather all of these different experiences and teach one thing to all of them. And, how do we handle that? Like, that's where we get comments where it's like, well, it's not my issue. Get over it.
Right.
Or we get comments saying, this has been my experience and it's been hard or it's been good, and somebody wants to push back. I've had many women say, when I share, it is hard to be a woman in the church. I have felt, XYZ. And I've had women say, I have never felt that in the church. I have never felt second in the church or whatever. And it's like, great. I'm so glad you haven't felt second in the church.
Right.
That is so wonderful for you. I have a different experience, and both of our experiences are true.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and it is so problematic when they're saying that to, like, debunk your experience. Be like, well, no, that's clearly not true because my experience is different.
Yeah. The temperature can be the same in the room, and people are going to feel it differently.
I love that. That is a perfect example. So how do we not be the person doing this? How do we look at ourselves and identify when we might be inadvertently doing this to others? And I think that's important that it's inadvertent, because I think that people saying these things are sincere. Yeah. And I think they're genuine, and I think they're wanting to help. They're just doing it in a tone-deaf kind of way. So how do we avoid being that tone-deaf person?
So I think education comes top of mind to me. Learning about people that are different from you.
Ooh, I love that.
That is going to be the most important thing. And not only learning, like reading books, but listening to people. You need to get close to people who are different. And that's what that quote from Henry Nouwen, it talks about of compassion asks us to go to where the hurt is, go to where the pain is. And so that means you have to go to the margins. Right. You have to get out of your comfy middle, and you have to go to the margins where people are struggling for any number of reasons. And you can listen, and you can just be there with them and learn as you're, being in community with people. Yeah. So that's what always comes top of mind to me.
I love that. I would even maybe split it into two different things here. And one's a kind of like higher level, lifelong pursuit, which is trying to recognize the humanity in others. and trying to recognize the inherent dignity that other people have and the inherent dignity in their lived experience. And that's what I hear you saying. Now, I think the other angle is what do you do in the moment?
Yeah.
I'll get there in a second, but first, I'm going to quote your favorite book.
Let's hear it.
I kind of jumped the line here. So this is Valerie Kaur from her amazing book, See No Stranger. She says, when we choose to wonder about people we don't know, when we imagine their lives and listen for their stories, we begin to expand the circle of those we see as part of us. We prepare ourselves to love beyond what evolution requires.
Yeah.
And that concept about wondering about other people, being curious about other people.
Yeah.
Your experience is different than mine. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Why do I feel so differently than you do? Why am I reacting the way that I'm reacting to what you're saying?
Yeah, I had actually written that the healthiest response when someone says this matters to me is to say, tell me more.
Yeah.
That curiosity, that wondering is so important. And I think when we are doing that, we have to realize that paradox is okay. And that is a skill, I think, that we have to develop. And not everybody does.
Yeah.
But we have to show up to a thing and say, these two things can be true. And how can I hold both of those?
Right.
How can I hold somebody who's struggling at church and my own testimony that is, I'm not struggling at church and I have this understanding and this is what has always helped me. How do I hold both of these things at the same time? It is a skill. I think that is a real skill that only practice is going to help.
Yeah, I love that. How can somebody not feel welcome in the ward and I do feel welcome in the ward and they're both true? How can we be in the room that's one temperature and somebody's cold and somebody else isn't? Yeah, I love that. Now, the other thing I was talking about was how do we catch ourselves in the moment? If we're saying something, or having that experience right then. I think there's a lot of things around developing deep listening skills. I have a certain little bag of tricks that I use. And I may have talked about this on the podcast before.
Tell us more.
I will. Thank you for asking. And this is something I've started doing a lot, and this is super helpful. This is even something I'll do when I'm out for a walk and I'm walking past people's houses and I don't know who lives in them.
Oh, yeah.
But I like to picture people eating breakfast. And they're sitting at a table maybe or a counter and they're eating a bowl of cereal. What kind of cereal are they eating? And it is such a humanizing thing for me to envision somebody doing something so mundane.
Yeah.
And so, maybe there's somebody that I see every week at church and they're always, dressed up. And now I'm envisioning them in sweatpants, sitting at their kitchen table, eating a bowl of cereal while flipping on their phone, something like that. And it turns them into a human being.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, now there's somebody I can relate to. Now we have common humanity, and now we can get past the labels or the judgments that I had started with.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom always would say, and this is a very common phrase of everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time.
Right.
We all are human and we have to do human things. And, it just is, it does help to just kind of bring people, not bring them down in like I'm making you bad, but like just humanizing them, bring them onto the same level that we're on.
Make them relatable.
Yeah, real.
Another one is picturing people interacting with their kids, especially if they have young kids. And now not every family is the same, but in a lot of families, little kids adore their mom and their dad. And so if I'm like, oh man, this person said this awful thing at church and boy, they're such a jerk and whatever. And I'm picturing their kids, giving them a hug goodnight and, I love you, Dad, and all this stuff. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. You're a human being.
Yeah.
I can work with that.
Yeah. I think the other thing to realize in the moment is that nobody gets to decide what matters to somebody else's soul. So,
interesting.
I'm going to have my own set of concerns and things that, ways that I connect to divinity or ways that I hear revelation or, whatever it is. And also things that I struggle with and things that hurt my heart. And, nobody gets to tell me that I don't get to worry about that. That was an interaction I had online this week, where somebody said, no, you need to go and you need to be there and listen to these hard things. And I'm like, you don't even know what I heard or how it affects me personally. Like, why would you make that assumption that I had to be there? It's so arrogant, I think, to put our understanding, our perspective onto other people when we don't know what they're going through.
Yeah, I think in the church we get really glued to this idea of there being like one right way to do things. And I think maybe this is born out of kind of, one true church kind of stuff. We really like having all the answers, in Brian McLaren's faith stages. That's a stage 2 mindset. But what that means is if somebody has found something that is working for them, they take that to be, oh, that is the one right way.
Yeah.
And so that's portable, right? I can recommend that to you and to everybody. It's working for me, and there's only one right way, and I have found it.
Yeah. I think that showed up a lot when we were young with how to do your Sabbath day.
Oh, yeah. Great example.
We don't get changed out of our church clothes, or we don't play with face cards on Sunday, or we don't listen to certain music or do
watch
movies
sports
and there was very much a prescription of how to do things, and if anybody did any different, it's like, okay, I'm gonna get out my ruler and see how many steps you've taken, or whatever. That's what it feels like when we're so stuck on the thing that works for us that we want to make everybody else do it as well.
Yeah.
Because they'll be happy, right? Like, works for me, they'll be happy if they live this exact way. It doesn't work that way.
Well, and we're in a church where anybody can and does get called as a Sunday school teacher, a primary teacher, teaching the youth, these sorts of things. And so we all get a pulpit for this at some point or another, and we'll teach a lesson about something. And for each of us, there may be things that aren't a struggle to us. For me, there's plenty of things I struggle with. The word of wisdom. Yeah. That's not something that I'm like relapsing back into and going, oh man, I messed up on that again. The word of wisdom takes up very little space in my brain. But it's realizing that for other people, it might be an enormous deal.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And it might take up a ton of space in their brain. And it's easy to dismiss that and say, yeah, this is not a big deal. And ultimately, when it comes to this invalidating thing, nobody keeps score. Like, we don't know when we've done it unless somebody tells us, which isn't going to happen super often.
Yeah, doesn't always help when they do.
Yeah,
if you're not in a good place,
if you're not ready to hear it. And so, like, we all probably do it, and we all probably are invalidating of other people's experiences at some point. And I wish we knew when, so we could go apologize, and we could go fix it. But the best we can do is just try to not do it anymore.
Yeah. On the church's website, they have a article called "Developing Empathy to Minister."
Nice.
And the definition that they give of empathy is understanding another person's feelings, thoughts, and conditions from their perspective rather than our own. And so, it's that old thing of put yourself in their shoes. And sometimes we don't even have to put ourselves in their shoes, but we should listen to them when they speak, when they share what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yeah.
And when we can listen and say, okay, well, they come from, a broken home, or they come from money, or, and help understand what has framed them. It just helps us have more grace, I think.
And we don't have to make them be like us.
Right.
We don't have to
want them to be like us.
Right.
Like, that's not a goal.
Right. We don't have to force them into that paradigm. Thomas Merton said this. He said, the beginning of love is to let those we love be perfectly themselves and not to twist them to fit our own image. Otherwise, we love only the reflection of ourselves we find in them.
I think that's what people are looking for.
Isn't that it?
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this worked for me. I'm going to make it work for you so we can be the same thing.
Yeah.
You can look just like me.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
Oof,
there we go.
That's like Susan and Cynthia say, I think we've reached the needing to lay down portion of the episode. I got to think about that for a while.
Thomas Merton will do that.
Yeah, that's really good.
Well, maybe let's just put some closing thoughts on it then. And I just have one more thought, which is, we talk about inherent human dignity, we talk about common humanity, and those are all super valid, and those are all terms that I use and value. Mm-hmm. But there's also the very basic concept that we're all children of God.
Yep.
And so not only are we all part of a common humanity, we're part of a common family with divine origin and destiny. Mm-hmm. So just one more quote from Richard Rohr. He says, "A mature Christian sees Christ in everything and everyone else." Mm-hmm. That is a definition that will never fail you, always demand more of you, and give you no reasons to fight, exclude, or reject anyone.
Yeah, I love that. And
so, we should absolutely see each other as humans. Mm-hmm. We should also see each other as divine.
Yeah.
Like, it's that line about you have never talked to a mere mortal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My closing thought is, usually issues, like if I'm sitting in the majority, everyone in the room looks like me, everyone thinks like me, issues aren't going to be brought up. Change isn't going to happen. Things aren't going to happen. Movement isn't going to happen.
Okay.
It's when people on the margins, in the minority, that don't feel the same, it's when they speak up that awareness comes. And so we have to, if we are in the minority, if we are on the margins, it's so important that we continue to share our experiences, because some people in the room may not ever think that. They might not understand where we're coming from, and it will be hard for them to hear maybe the first time that they hear it. Mm-hmm. But the more that we share what we're going through and be authentic and share our true ways that we're showing up at church, I think that people will hopefully soften and start to have more grace and more understanding and more compassion, more empathy for the people that are in the room.
Yeah.
And that goes both ways. We can hear things that, I can hear a stage one believer, a binary thinker that says, one way that they approach church, and I can say, I'm so glad that works for them.
Right.
It doesn't work for me that way, but I can validate and honor your experience and how you're approaching this topic.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Okay, we better end it right there.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
We'll see y'all next time.